Hi folks, HR Funk here. Welcome to part 2 of my review of the new Springfield Armory Echelon pistol. In part 1 of this series, I did a close-up shop review of this handgun, so if you want to see all the specific characteristics of the Springfield Armory Echelon, go back and make sure you watch part 1. Because in part 2, I'm going to be strictly shooting this pistol and giving you my impressions of how it performs. And I want to say before I get started, once again, thank you to House of Pain Munitions for supplying the Springfield Armory Echelon. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it for this review. If you go to House of Pain, be sure to use my discount code there, which is HRFunk10, and that'll save you 10% on your purchase from House of Pain. And also, thanks to House of Pain for supplying the ammunition that I'm going to be using today. This is the 124 grain full metal jacket 9mm ammunition from House of Pain that I'm going to be using to test out the Echelon. So now, without further delay, let's get started and see how this pistol does. So first up with the Echelon, I'm going to be doing a slow fire accuracy test from a distance of 15 yards. I will be shooting from the bench off of these bags. And I decided, since I mounted the Holosun 507C during the shop review of this pistol, that I would go ahead and leave it mounted for the shooting review. The sights on the Echelon, as I mentioned during the shop review, are essentially the same sights that are on the Hellcat pistol, which I like very much. I'm used to using them. So I'm more concerned about seeing how an optic does, especially with this new optic mounting platform that Springfield Armory is using. Now, I have not yet zeroed this optic. So when I start shooting at the target, these are going to be the first shots that I've fired from the Echelon, and I'm just going to aim with the reticle in the very center of the target, and I'm going to be looking at the group size from this distance, not necessarily the group location. After I fire out this first 5-shot group, I'll make any necessary sight corrections, and then I'll go on with the testing from there. So here we go. Let's take a look at the 15-yard accuracy from the Echelon. On second thought, I don't think I'm going to make any sight correction at all. Let's go take a look at the target. So somehow I managed to blow it on the last shot. The first 4 shots, I should measure that. That is under an inch center to center from that distance of 15 yards. I just let that last shot get away from me. It went high and to the right, but I am very happy with that. Again, there was no shooting with that handgun before I started with what you just saw, and I'm very happy with that accuracy from 15 yards. So now let's move on and start into some defensive drills. Next, I'm going to be shooting some controlled pairs from a distance of 5 yards. Let's see how that goes. So my first 2 shots essentially went through the exact same hole from that distance of 5 yards, and I raised my point of aim slightly because I believe I'm getting a little bit of mechanical offset from that distance of 5 yards, or maybe I should say that close range of 5 yards. Raised my point of aim to about here, and then everything else stayed in this very center square. And I think also part of the reason this first couple of shots was low is because this is kind of a heavy trigger in the Echelon. I mentioned this back during my shop review. It's averaging about 6 pounds per pull, and I think probably I was just pulling that down a little bit. I talked quite a bit when I was talking in the shop review about this not being a match grade trigger, and I think that kind of helps to bear it out. Although, when you are a little bit more mindful to your shooting and your point of aim, obviously it's capable of very good accuracy. So we're going to see if that continues as I now move back to 7 yards and try some failure drills from that distance. All right, no problem with the failure drills from that distance of 7 yards. The body shots are well centered in the target. All but 2 of them are on this very center square. Now I was holding my point of aim still right about here to account for that mechanical offset. And I had a couple of them just a little bit lower than the center square, but if you can see the faint outline of the heart here, all those shots are on the heart from that distance of 7 yards. So I'm feeling good about that. Headshots, 2 of them in the no reflex zone, feeling good about that. Pulled this one just outside, and the thing that I notice is I do have to be mindful of that trigger. If I just come up and line up the sights and start my trigger press like I would with, say my Canik SF, then I'm going to pull a shot a little bit. So I have to slow down just a bit, be mindful of that trigger, and make sure that I am executing a good trigger press to make sure the shots go where I want them to go. So I have a feeling that's going to be a continued theme throughout this review. But now let's move back to a distance of 15 yards, and from that distance I'll try 5 shots to the body, and we'll see how that goes. No problem keeping those 5 shots centered in the chest of the target from that distance of 15 yards. And I was firing at a medium shot tempo, I would say. And at that shot tempo and being mindful of my trigger control, it was pretty easy to place those shots. So again, I'm feeling good about the performance of the Echelon. It's not blowing me away with its performance, largely because of that trigger that I'm starting to not care for all that much. But all in all, it's performing well. So now I'm going to move back and try the same drill from a distance of 25 yards, and we'll see how it does from there. And from 25 yards, not bad. All these shots are still in the chest and lung area. I've got 1 shot that's a little low here. These are all looking pretty good. That's probably 3.5 inches, maybe center to center from that distance to 25 yards. That probably opens it up to 6-ish inches, 5.5, somewhere around there. Also, in case you didn't notice, I did switch to the extended magazine for the last couple of tests, and it's running fine. The reliability with the Echelon has been perfect. Again, probably the biggest fly in the ointment for me is just the trigger, which I think is probably responsible for at least this shot, if not this one as well, from that distance of 25 yards. And when you line this up and you have the big reticle from the 507 on the target, you want to just press that trigger, and you have to slow down and be mindful of that, because if you're not careful, you'll pull a shot. Obviously, any of these would be decent for defensive use. You know, everything, as I said, is in, basically everything is in the left lung, except for this shot, which is in the aorta. So all effective defensive shots as far as that goes. And I did notice when I was doing my bench test at the very beginning of the video that I was hitting slightly to the right. So I had a feeling these shots were going to be slightly to the right from back there. But again, it wasn't enough that I was going to take the time to screw around and try to make a sight correction before I fired that drill. So now it's time to find out if the Springfield Armory Echelon is a 7-yard tack driver. Place your bets, folks, and we'll see how it goes. So I'm set up at a distance of 7 yards. I've got 3 shots loaded in the magazine. And because of the offset of this sight, I'm expecting to hit a little bit low from this distance. So for my first shot at the tack, I'm going to aim at 12 o'clock, just above the tack. Actually, I'm also hitting a little bit to the right, so I'm probably going to aim maybe 10:30, just above the tack, and we'll see what happens. And I didn't hold quite high enough. So I'll try the second shot and go just a little farther, both of those directions. And I'd say that was about right. I'll show you where I was holding when I walk up to the target. So for the first shot, I was holding right about here, maybe half an inch off the tack, and that's the shot they hit here. So my second shot, I was holding up here and managed to squeeze off and zap that thing. So yes, the Springfield Armory Echelon is a 7-yard tack driver. Although I was battling that trigger a little bit and trying to hold my reticle right where I wanted it and squeeze off a good shot. And I managed it, but it was not as easy as it has been with some other handguns that I've tested over the years. All right, folks, final thoughts on the Springfield Armory Echelon. There's going to be two parts to my final thoughts. And first, I'm going to talk about the handgun itself. It's a nice handgun. It feels good in the hand. It shoots pretty well. It really doesn't have anything about it specifically that distinguishes it from a lot of other handguns. And for an MSRP of $679, I'm happier with my Canik SF that cost a couple of $100 less than this does. So, I don't know. It does have some nice features. I like the ambi mag release. I like the ambi slide stop. The sights I've talked about before. I like this sighting system. I'm not sure that these little protrusions on the side of the frame really do much for me. For someone who really likes to shoot fast and they feel like that helps them hold down on the front of the handgun a little bit more, maybe it helps out. It strikes me as a little bit of a gimmick, truthfully, but if you think it helps you and if Springfield Armory thinks it helps them sell handguns, then it certainly doesn't hurt anything being there. The slide serrations are functional. The grip contour, as I said before, is comfortable. The pistol points pretty naturally. So there's really nothing wrong with it, but again, as far as the handgun itself goes, I don't know of anything that really distinguishes it except for what I'm going to talk about in the second part of my final thoughts, and that is this optics mounting platform. Way back at the beginning of the year, I produced a video where I talked about the things I was hoping to see in 2023, and one of the things that I mentioned was a universal mounting platform for handgun optics that was similar to what we have with long guns and the 1913 rail. And I doubt that anyone from Springfield Armory saw that video, and I don't know who dreamed up this optics mounting platform, but it pretty much is what I was thinking of when I made that statement in the video. It is really nice to be able to have a platform like this that doesn't require plates or brackets or anything else that either the manufacturer includes or doesn't include, or you have to order and sometimes they charge you for and sometimes they don't, and trying to figure out which one you need and all that. It is really nice to have this handgun that you just take off the mounting plate, put on the optic you want, configure those little pins the way you want them to be, and tighten down the optic and go out to the range and start shooting. That is really fantastic. And kudos to whoever the designer or the engineer was who came up with that system. I'm very impressed by that. And to come out here as I did and have the optic as close to zero as it was, now I could have fine-tuned it a little bit. I could have moved it slightly to the left from that distance of 15 yards, but for the shooting I was going to do, I didn't have to. And if someone is going to get this handgun, put an optic on like that, and maybe use it for home defense or what have you, and they just don't want to screw around, that certainly was accurate enough to be able to use for home defense purposes at home defense ranges. Now, I'm not suggesting that you buy a handgun and you mount an optic and don't zero it or anything. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that it is very close when you put the optic on and torque it down and go out and start shooting. So I was impressed by that. All in all, I like the Echelon. I think it's a pretty good pistol. Like I said, I think the price is a little steep. I think a lot of that is probably paying the engineer for designing that optic mounting platform. But overall, it's a nice pistol. So if you're interested in the Springfield Armory Echelon, I can't say anything really bad about it, except I don't like the trigger. That's probably my biggest complaint with the entire pistol, but I've had other polystriker pistols that I also didn't care for the trigger on. This one is just a pound to a pound and a half heavier than I would care for it to be for this type of a trigger that has that amount of creep and everything else. So there you go, folks. That's my review of the Springfield Armory Echelon. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Again, I want to thank House of Pain Munitions for loaning me the Echelon pistol for this review and for providing the ammunition that I used. And if you didn't notice, that ammunition performed very, very well through this handgun. It was demonstrating the type of accuracy and consistency that I've come to expect from House of Pain ammunition. Also, if you buy anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. And if you go to House of Pain Munitions, you can use my discount code there, which is HRFUNK10, and that'll save you 10% off your purchase from House of Pain. Last but not least is the Target sponsor, and once again, I was using one of their Targets out here today. Go to Targets online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.